men and women falsely accused of crimes they didn't commit, held and tortured at Camp Greyhound. These are human beings who were forced to submit to humiliating and degrading strip searches, thrown down and treated like animals, their constitutional rights ripped away from them by officers who were meant to protect them and ensure their safety during the catastrophe known as Hurricane Katrina. Your Honors, members of the jury, my name is Sharina Silver, and my co-counselors and I are representing the men and women who were sentenced to weeks of torture in this case. We intend to prove these officers guilty of abusing their power. During Hurricane Katrina, these officers took advantage of their powers and used it to arrest citizens for petty crimes that many of them didn't commit. Officers during situations such as natural disasters are meant to help ease the fears of the citizens and prevent others from taking advantage of the situation, not take advantage of the situation themselves. The 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution states, "Excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted." So why should these officers be able to get away with what they put these people through? Multiple witnesses testified to the sadistic punishments used to humiliate and torture these men and women for the pleasure of the officers. One man, Todd Cambono, testified to the abuse a mentally stunted man was put through. He states they pulled him out of his cage, dragged him where everyone could see him, restricted his hands and feet, and sprayed him head to toe with pepper spray. A man with the mentality of a 5 or 6-year-old was pepper sprayed. He doesn't even have the ability to grasp the situation to understand what they did to him. This man should not have been in a prison. He should have been in a hospital getting the help he needed for his disability. Abdurrahman Zeitoun, a man accused of stealing property that he owned, was in need of medical attention multiple times but never received the help he deserved. Zeitoun, during his arrest, had a piece of metal implanted in his foot. Over time, this led to an infection. When he called for a doctor, the officers ignored him and continued walking away. He used a shine from a broken Tabasco bottle to cut the piece of metal out. Zeitoun was forced to turn to unsanitary methods to alleviate himself of the injury. This is considered cruel and unusual punishments. The officers knew he needed medical attention but turned their backs on him. Are these the type of people you want to trust to protect you? These poor men and women imposed excessive fines and with no way to get help. The officers say they were doing it to protect the others who stayed in the city, and that if they paid their bail, they would be free. But how can they afford to pay their bail when no one knows they are in police custody? Marlene Martin, a woman who during the hurricane had moved in a hotel to wait the storm out. But one day she went to gather food from her car, but was arrested with the claim the food in her car was stolen from a nearby deli. She is charged with stealing $63.50 worth of groceries. Her bail was set at $50,000. The usual bail for a misdemeanor like this is $500. She was charged 100 times more than she should have been. Marlene was taken and held for weeks at Camp Greyhound and later the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women before being arrested. Hundreds of others share stories similar to Zeitoun and Marlene, many held in the custody of these officers for months and for many years. These are situations no one should have to endure, especially during the conditions they are currently in. Your Honors, members of the jury, I submit to you to find the accused officers guilty of abusing their power. Thank you for your consideration.
Your Honor, members of the jury, good afternoon. My name is Eric Shajan, and I'm here on this lovely day on behalf of the officers of the National Guard who were stationed in New Orleans after the horrible effects of Hurricane Katrina. In this case, I intend to prove that these officers were in fact not guilty of abusing their power and only doing their job when they arrested and incarcerated men and women that were thought to be looters after the horrible storm, including Mr. Zeitoun and his friends on September 5th, 2005. You have heard the prosecution explain what she hopes will be proven, but the prosecutor has not told you all the facts. After the Hurricane Katrina, chaos raged. Not only was there a number of people that were dying, but people began to loot excessively. Mr. Zeitoun even talked about the topic, saying, "This was an organized group of criminals, opportunists, who were not simply taking what they needed to survive. They were stealing money and goods from the gas station." These men that sit before you were sent to New Orleans to end the chaos that these criminals created. When they found Mr. Zeitoun and his friends together with a boat near a house, they had no other reason to believe and take them for looters. You may be saying, well, they could have just been common people, but why having a boat, a method of transportation, that would allow them to evacuate to safer grounds, would they stay someplace that they were not safe? This, plus the fact that there was a mandatory evacuation in New Orleans, would have given anyone reason to believe that the men in the house, in this case Mr. Zeitoun and his friends, were not common people, but thieves, who were benefiting from the storm that forced many to leave their home and leave behind valuable things. Once the officers saw this, they followed protocol. They told Mr. Zeitoun and his friends to enter their boat and took them into custody, where they investigated further. They did all the necessary things. The prosecution may argue that the officers didn't read the men their rights, but you have to give these officers a break. So they forgot to read the men their rights. Although it is a big thing, these men must have been exhausted from the busy day that they had been facing, getting wet and seeing destruction everywhere, men and women in the water dead. The last thing they wanted to deal with were presumed looters, who were taking advantage of a horrible event. Once they got to the military post, the officers found $12,400 in cash from the bags that Mr. Zeitoun and his friends had with them. Let me ask you a question. What would you have thought? With all the looting that was going on and the mandatory evacuation that was in place, these officers are not guilty of something obvious at the time. They definitely thought they were looting. What else could they have thought and done, besides sending them to prison? All the clues at the time led them to be guilty. Everyone was in survival mode. There was no order, which is why these men were sent. They were sent to regain and put an end to the looting, and overall help and evacuate people, which is what they did. These men are good. They help the citizens of America every day. Why should you fail to trust them now? If they chose to put certain people in jail, it was because they had a reason. They worked with what they got, and what they got was little. These men need your trust now. Don't fail them. Your Honor, members of the jury, I submit to you to find the accused officers not guilty of abusing their power. Thank you for your time, and I hope you take all the facts and conditions into consideration.